El Incidente is a Mexican fiction thriller film released in the year 2014. The plot of the film follows two criminal brothers who, after getting caught by police, race down a stairwell to get away from the stairwell to get away, but the stairwell turns out to be never-ending. At the same time, a bickering family begins a road trip on a road that never ends and keeps looping on them. The film starts with an old lady lying on an escalator dressed in a wedding outfit and reminiscing about the time when she was young and newly married to the love of her life. The scene then transitions to the present, where a small-time criminal named Carlos is seen entering his apartment building in an elevator. As he enters his apartment, he finds his younger brother, Oliver, petrified and restless. Carlos tries to calm him down and informs him cheerfully that they will no longer need to do illegal things, as their mother has lent them a good amount of money. But Oliver is still fidgety, and before he could explain the reason for his behavior, Detective Marco Antonio Molina emerges from behind. Seeing him, Carlos flips out and starts defending himself, but the detective has already taken a confession from Oliver by threatening him. Oliver begs forgiveness, but Carlos demands the detective show him the arrest warrant. Marco admits that he does not have a warrant, but still wants to take both the brothers at gunpoint down to the station to interrogate them. Carlos starts panicking and starts fighting Marco. Oliver helps him too, and the duo flee away from their apartment through its stairwell. Marco pursues them, and when he's unable to run down any further, he unintentionally pulls the gun trigger, shooting Carlos in the leg. Carlos falls down and Oliver starts screaming for help. Meanwhile, Marco is devastated by his own action and feels puzzled about why he shot Carlos. All of a sudden, the three of them are startled by the sound of a horrible explosion in the distance. Carlos's wound starts bleeding severely, so Oliver puts pressure on it and keeps berating Marco for trying to kill his brother. Marco loses his cool and takes Oliver to gunpoint, asking him to shut up. When Oliver demands to take Carlos to the hospital, Marco refuses and tells him that Carlos will be treated at the station. As the trio start walking down the stairs, they realize that the stairs turn out to be endless. Marco thinks the building is extremely confusing as the floors keep repeating with no door to exit. In his fury, he warns the brothers to stay still so he can find a way to exit. He then starts running down the stairs, crossing the 9 floors, but is astonished to see Carlos and Oliver again. Carlos thinks that it's the bullet that is messing with his head, which is why the stairs are looping in on him. Marco throws his keys through the stairwell, which, instead of falling down, return back to him from above. He loses his mind and furiously asks the brothers what they drugged him with. Oliver does not resist back and makes it clear that they have nothing to do with this, as they're also trapped. Oliver insists on removing the bullet from Carlos. However, Carlos is scared that Oliver will end up infecting him, as Carlos takes him as a little brother who doesn't know how to perform even the basic everyday task. Oliver runs to the vending machine to fetch water and wash the wound, and keeps cursing Marco for hurting his brother. Later, Marco is seen going through his wallet and looking at his family photograph. All of a sudden, a miniature playing card falls from his pocket, which he does not recognize. Without thinking twice, he tears the card into many pieces and throws it away. He then gives some kind of drug to Carlos that he has on himself for personal use, so Carlos can pass out for a few hours and escape his pain. After Carlos passes out, Marco and Oliver sit on the stairs and chat for a while. Marco shows Oliver his family photograph and tells him that he was supposed to celebrate his 15th wedding anniversary with his wife that night, but ended up getting trapped in a stairwell. Oliver does not show any kind of empathy and instead threatens to kill him if Carlos dies. He then goes through his bag and takes out his belongings, which include a bunch of random things. The next day, Carlos gains consciousness but is in terrible condition. Before dying, he asks Oliver to enjoy and appreciate his life, as it's something he could never do. As Oliver laments Carlos's death, Marco is surprised to see that the vending machine on the stairwell has become restocked, exactly as it was 24 hours ago. Seeing Marco's insensitivity to his situation, Oliver fumes with anger and points Marco's gun at him, threatening to kill him. Marco tries to knock some sense into Oliver and assures him that he did not intentionally fire at Carlos. Moreover, he makes Oliver realize that he's losing his mind, as it's a symptom of losing his loved one. The scene cuts to a bickering family having their family time. Among them is a young girl, Camilla, playing a game with her stepfather, Roberto. Camilla's brother, Daniel, does not seem to have a nice relationship with his stepfather and is very quiet and distant. They are planning to take a road trip for which Daniel is seen packing his stuff, among which he packs a deck of miniature playing cards, just like the one Marco found in his wallet. Sandra is the mother of Daniel and Camilla, and they are preparing to take a 6-hour-long road trip to meet their biological father, Tomas. Roberto feels apprehensive about the trip, but Sandra reassures him the long drive will give him a chance to bond with her children, especially with Daniel. Before leaving, Sandra asks Daniel to take Camilla's inhaler as she suffers from asthma every now and then. Just before leaving, Daniel receives a call from Tomas and excitedly informs him about the deck of cards that he brings along. Sandra then takes the phone and offensively assures her ex-husband that Roberto has given up drinking for 5 years and will be driving the car soberly. Finally, the family gets on the road, and on their way, Roberto randomly finds a piece of green bamboo in his car, which he cannot recognize. So without paying any attention, he throws it out on the road. On their way, while Camilla is seen enjoying the journey, Daniel seems lost and dull. Roberto stops at a gas station where he offers Camilla juice despite knowing the fact that she's allergic to sugar. Camilla trusts Roberto and takes a sip from his juice. She then goes to the bathroom and before leaving, gives her inhaler to Roberto, asking him to keep it safe. When Sandra finds out that Roberto fed Camilla sugar, she freaks out and berates him for being a careless man. They resume the journey, but halfway through it, Camilla slowly starts having an asthma attack. Sandra and Roberto step out of the car to check on her, and accidentally Roberto steps on Camilla's inhaler, destroying it in the process. Sandra feels worried for her daughter and asks Roberto to turn the car back. Roberto turns the car, and all of a sudden, the four of them are startled by the sound of a loud explosion in the distance. Sandra starts panicking and bickering that Tomas was right about Roberto when he called him a drunk and a clumsy man. Roberto keeps driving and soon realizes that he is repeatedly passing the same gas station and that the road keeps looping on him. Sandra is unable to see her daughter suffering and insists on driving in hopes to find an exit. Daniel realizes that the clock in the car shows evening time despite the sun being out. Unable to breathe, Camilla starts turning blue, and Sandra feels terrible as she cannot do anything to help her. Roberto feels ashamed to have destroyed Camilla's inhaler and keeps driving to find an exit. However, he keeps passing the same road sign. Exasperated, he gets out of the car and walks through the brush to seek help. Soon, Camilla stops breathing and dies due to the absence of her inhaler. Sandra's unable to believe this and starts thinking that she's stuck in a nightmare. She sits in the driving seat and despite not being a licensed driver, starts driving. She keeps saying to herself, "This is a dream and you have to wake up." Seeing her completely lose her mind, Daniel picks up Camilla's body and leaves the car while Sandra drives off rashly. He keeps walking down the road in the opposite direction, holding his sister's body. All of a sudden, Sandra meets them at the same point and is devastated to know that they are trapped. She walks into a store and mourns over her fate. On the other hand, Daniel spots Roberto running back from the bushes, and all of them give up their hopes of escaping. The scene transitions back to the group that was trapped in the stairwell. Through Marco and Oliver's message written on the walls of the stairwell, it becomes clear that 35 years have passed since the incident, and both of them are still trapped in the same location. Each day, they find a fresh copy of all their belongings. Both Marco and Oliver have turned into old men surviving on the food from the vending machine that restocks every 24 hours. Over the decades, these items gather into towering piles as the duo attempts to live their repetitive lives. Marco has turned weak and is unable to climb the stairs, so he drags himself on the stairs to get a hold of whatever he wants. Meanwhile, Oliver keeps himself fit through regular exercise in the stairwell. He even made a shower for himself using punctured plastic water bottles and using nail cutters to trim his hair and mustache. With the overload of everything, Oliver makes sure to keep things organized every day, such as placing his backpack, money, nail cutter, clothes, headphones, book, and many more things in their respective piles. Oliver leads Marco in rituals worshiping Carlos's skeleton to keep him busy. Marco is seen remembering his daughters and calculating their ages with Oliver. All of a sudden, the scene cuts to the same escalator that was shown at the start of the film, with the same old lady handing a rat to someone passing by. The scene cuts to the endless road where the bickering family was trapped. There's trash all along the road, which also kept multiplying day after day for 35 years. Daniel, who's now a grown-up, lives self-reliantly, secluded from Roberto and Sandra. He has now accumulated a stash of Camilla's inhalers and piled them on top of one another. He cooks food independently and plays with his deck of cards alone. Meanwhile, in the middle of the night, Marco has an epiphany and calls Oliver to explain to him that he in reality is Daniel and that none of this is real, but instead an alternate version of their real lives. On the other hand, Sandra dies and Roberto buries her. All of a sudden, Roberto and Marco's heads start pounding and they're struck by clarity. Roberto explains that he's about to die and now understands why they are stuck here. Simultaneously, Roberto reveals to Daniel and Marco reveals to Oliver that nothing that has happened is real. Marco reveals that he actually is Daniel, the 10-year-old boy from the incident of the endless road, whereas Roberto elucidates to Daniel that when he was a 10-year-old boy, he was stuck on a green bamboo raft for 35 years after the instructor met with an accident. Roberto urges Daniel to note down whatever he's saying as he'll forget it, just the way he himself forgot when he was told about it. Both Marco and Roberto emphasize the fact that only physical movement is not vital, but emotional movement is important too, and that a human sacrifice is required to initiate this repetitive incident, thus explaining the cycle of incidents and new dimensions. Both the elderly men explain that younger people who get stuck in a time loop come out better than older people because they enjoy their time as compared to older people. Moreover, young people in their real life have more contentment and affluence than older people who experience more sadness and bad luck. As Marco and Roberto explain Oliver and Daniel respectively, snippets of their real lives are shown portraying their good and bad times. Before taking his last breath, Roberto requests Daniel not to enter the car so that he can break the cycle of creating new dimensions. Marco, on the other hand, requests Oliver not to enter the elevator so that he can also break the cycle. As Marco and Roberto die, they leave a small red diary for Oliver and Daniel. Daniel buries Roberto and starts walking on the road. He finds a police car parked in the middle of the road, and after looking inside it, he walks away. However, after taking his belongings, he enters the police car, following his fate against Roberto's advice. Meanwhile, Oliver initially tries to kill himself but ultimately enters the elevator to leave the apartment building, going against Marco's advice. Daniel becomes Marco and heads out to arrest Carlos and Oliver after he reads the red diary. On the other hand, Oliver becomes the Russian bellhop named Carl, who's an elevator operator. Glimpses of Marco, Oliver, and Daniel's lives are shown, including their positive and negative incidents. While Marco is off to arrest Oliver and Carlos, Carl operates the elevator for the two newlyweds. As the newlyweds arrive on their hotel floor, Carl brings a bee that stings the groom. Suddenly, the three of them are startled to hear a loud explosion. Since the groom is allergic to bee stings, he dies. The film ends with Carl and the bride trapped in a new dimension for the next 35 years. The movie has a rating of 6.3 on IMDb. I hope you all like this video. If yes, then make sure to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more movie recaps.